Welcome back, everyone. After waiting around half a year since the announcement trailer of Elden Ring Nightreign in December, we finally have it. There's so much to go through when it comes to this game that I'll probably only be able to scratch the surface here, as I've only played so much of it. Because of that, this video will only showcase a smaller portion of gameplay overall. A lot of people ask me if I think it's weird that FromSoft was working on this title, and to give it to you plain and simple, I think it's awesome and they should experiment more with projects like Nightreign. Now, this game is far from perfect, and I've noticed this even with just a dozen hours sunken into it. Some questions I've gotten is, why isn't Nightreign a DLC for regular Elden Ring? And is it worth the price? To answer those all at once, this game is packed with enough features to get quite a bit of playtime out of it just simply progressing through the major content. The downside I've heard from people that have played the game more is that the replayability is not as high as they would prefer after completing the series of Night Lords. This may be rectified with additional content and gameplay changes in the future, but for now, I would expect most of the value the average player will get out of this experience lies in the completion of all the final bosses. The game itself is actually quite hard. So much so that after having 700 hours in Elden Ring and thousands upon thousands in the Dark Souls trilogy, there was still a pretty big learning curve of the flow of gameplay for me. This could be one reason getting into the experience with ease may be daunting for some. I'm gonna go ahead and fully expose the truth, but here's some footage of me dying on the tutorial. Multiple times, not just once. I already had played a little bit of the network test and am familiar with Morgott from Elden Ring. The extra bit of spice they gave him in the form of some additional attacks and behaviors, along with the challenge of not being set up much to take him down, definitely got to me. Nightraign's randomization is okay at best, and unfortunately, this is one downside I've noticed fairly early, where the variety of content you battle outside the final Night Lords doesn't change as much as I would have hoped due to fairly smaller pools of possible enemies. I hope this increases as they update the game, so instead of just adding additional maps and Night Lords, they actually increase the density of existing pools of enemies. All in all, existing randomizers of the previous titles give such a big variety to outcomes in comparison. The feel of the basic mechanics in Nightreign is very much in line with base Elden Ring. Now, there's quite a few new features, like the speedy sprint, the special abilities of the character classes, and the climbing of walls, just to name a few. But the fluidity is there, and rarely will the mechanics be the shortcoming of your enjoyment. To go along with this, the quality of the game is satisfying for me personally. In terms of graphics, running this in 1440p resolution on PC at 60 frames is just beautiful. The visuals are a slight upgrade to the base Elden Ring, and it shows. This is one aspect I'm happy with, because they could have easily nerfed the visuals, seeing as this game isn't mainline in their series, and rather a detour along the way. I don't think it needs to look super pretty to perform the way it does and give us the gameplay that we expect from it, but it's cool that it looks pretty good. When it comes to character classes, they made some memorable and creative characters given the type of combat the game offers. The classic 4 characters featured in the network test I tried were Wilder, Guardian, Duchess, and the Recluse. Now we have an additional 4 classes with Raider, Executor, Revenant, and Iron Eye. Wilder is your classic Elden Ring sword and shield build with simple features, like the hook and the explosive bolt, allowing you to pull enemies closer and deal big damage with stagger. Guardian is able to block the best out of the entirety of the character classes with his great shield, and has the whirlwind ability to knock back enemies and deflect projectiles. His ultimate ability, Wings of Salvation, allows him to perform an airborne high jump that slams in a quake of damage with bonus healing and defense buffs surrounding the affected area. This is a great tool for resurrecting your downed allies. He also is the only non-human character, and I love the design. Duchess is extremely fast with a flurry of attacks on her base weapon, and extreme mobility with dodging and movement. Her ability allows the turning back of time to leverage extra damage dealt, repeating it once again for the whole team. I love the idea of how this encourages coordination between your allies and requires good timing for random opportunities, giving a decent reward in trade. Her ultimate ability allows for invisibility for the entire team, and this has straight up saved me in very tricky situations. Recluse, though very tricky to use, is a magic caster that absorbs the most recent element dealt with her ability, allowing her to make a cocktail with 3 selections of the 4 elements available. Between fire, magic, lightning, and holy, you can pair 3 of a kind, double of one, and a single of other, or 3 different elements, all culminating in different outcomes for the magic it creates. These concoctions have their own cool mechanics that have the most depth we've seen for a magic character in a FromSoft game. Soul Blood Song, her ultimate ability, marks an enemy. Upon you or your allies hitting that enemy, you will recover HP and FP. Raider is the big bonk lord of strength builds. The passive ability called Fighter's Resolve, making him have hyper armor, allows you to plow through enemies without interruption. His skill Retaliate charges up, and when taking a hit you can return a massive stagger to the enemy. His ultimate ability summons a totem below his feet, and you and your team have the advantage of high ground when needed in a moment to rest, or even to revive down allies a bit safer. I've even seen it lift enemies. Executor is a character to pick if one of your favorite games is Sekiro, like me. He can use Deflex with his Curse Blade ability and charge up a buff on his blade after successfully parrying. Once it's active, it gives you a powerful hit when paired with the Unsheath attack. His ability of transforming into a beast is easily one of the coolest things in the game to me so far. I had a ton of fun clobbering enemies, and the special swipe attack staggered enemies and bosses every single time I used it. He also gains more health when you use his ability, so it's great when you're low on regular HP. Revenant is a necromancer that uses summons. Even the enemies you kill can resurrect as allies from her passive ability. She can summon her deceased family as 3 unique spirits to battle with your party. Her ultimate allows temporary invincibility and grants any downed ally an instant resurrection. This ability is incredibly powerful when using her as a supporting role. Iron Eye is the ranged character of the cast with the passive to increase drop rates, making initial build setup a bit sweeter. He can create a weak point on enemies by marking them with his skill, and then the piercing shot ultimate not only looks amazing, but will go through multiple enemies at once, giving us collateral fiends of the Call of Duty sniping days something to live for once again. Now, with all these unique characters already offering a lot of versatility and strategy, especially when you can only have a party of 3 of them, this alone will create some depth on the player side of things depending on how you build your party and your individual character. How you use them is up to you, but there are clear roles defined by the strengths and weaknesses of these characters, and this is immediately one of the things I had a bit of a learning curve with when starting the game. One of the things I can recommend to somebody new is picking a very basic character, like Wilder for example, and then going into the more experimental territory of something like the Recluse character later on. The actual Night Lord bosses are the centerpiece of combat in the game, and they're the whole point of building up your team to have the best chance of beating them. Even though you have a lot of decently challenging field bosses, Everjails and more, there's no doubt that being leveled properly and having the right items on hand is very important to even have a chance at winning in this game. The item variety in the game is decent at best, but with some options not working in tandem with certain characters as much as others, you'll eventually find a definitive go-to set of tools that will work to your advantage more. A lot of this can be based off the character sheet that shows the scaling affinity for different types of stats like dexterity, strength, arcane, etc. Matching weapons that have a better scaling with the letter for that character will give you the better bonus, making clear sets of items for different builds. Having repeat weapons drop that just have a higher value of damage but offer no greater status effects or anything else is something that I wish they didn't allow in the randomization, but it seems like if you plan your route accordingly and give yourself enough time, there's always going to be good equipment. The risk of getting the best of the best is gated behind going to bigger features on the map. For example, on day 1, it could be a lot smarter to skip certain things like Everjails, field bosses, and the main castle just to avoid early deaths and a loss of time. I found eventually hunting the Scarabs, which will drop talismans, marking a route with churches that give you extra flask uses, and heading through smaller forts and camps allowed me to save time and set up better. While I'm no expert on this game whatsoever, I'm excited to learn more about the strategy and also what types of challenges and runs could be pulled off once the game is fully mastered. Relic Rights gives extra bonuses upon spawning into a match and are essential as you obtain better ones. Figuring out the best balance per character is a whole nother endeavor. Basic features like having the training area in the round table hold is not only essential, but it's also nice they made it fairly streamlined, allowing you to check out the items you would normally find in the map itself after queuing and testing those as well. You can set your abilities to always be refreshed and just spam different combos of stuff until you understand what you're doing with no risk of fumbling on that particular character more than you would need to in an actual match. The map itself is laid out with enough vertical aspects that makes it very fun to run through, with plateaus, tunnels, interiors, and other intricacies. Deciding to go for something you're not familiar with on a tight time frame as the night circle closes in poses many challenges. I've had times where I just barely got an item that was indeed worth it, but I took a little damage from the night circle, then just barely made it back to the safe zone. Controls of the map are easy to use, and it's fairly simple to read overall. Something I had noticed recently when looking at a particular location on the map is that you see elements beside them. These basic icons can give you an idea of not only the theme of that area, but also what types of equipment you will get in return. The Night Lords at the end of the night cycle have a weakness outlined beside their picture in the lobby. This is something that gives you a bit of an ability to pre-plan when knowing the map and its icons better. What kind of audience is this game for exactly? Well, I believe there'll be a good amount of you that like most of the FromSoft games in the past and can appreciate and get on board with Nightreign. But likewise, this is by no means as general of a game for the audience as the mainline titles like Dark Souls or the original Elden Ring. You have to get on board with the time pressure element, and the aspect of leisure doesn't really exist the same way. Most certainly, once you get a grasp of it, it can be your kickback game with friends in your downtime, and you definitely won't have to be grinding constantly to keep up, but the initial curve might sway some opinions mainly due to how it dictates the pace. I do believe there'll be an audience out there that will gain interest in other games FromSoft has made by trying out this game, whether it's from existing enjoyment with multiplayer formats that have some overlap, or simply it just being the most accessible entry for them in FromSoft titles at that time they start. The game's matchmaking was a bit dodgy on day one by use of password and having a friend directly invited, but we realized that for this specific occasion, for some reason, using the password and not having an invitation to the team made it a little bit easier. Now on day 2, this was the exact opposite. So I'm not exactly sure if this was just a fluke or there's actual issues with the matchmaking, but all in all, we did get connected to quite a few matches and there wasn't too much downtime. Two major differences of playing with a party of 3 versus just by yourself is scaling will be adjusted to make it more fair, and the strategy will change with the priority of what you actually focus on. When you have a friend go down in a group of 3, or even worse, have one player left standing, this immediately creates a balancing act of what options you have to res the downed characters, but it may be distracting or demanding enough to not be worth it going for that moment. During that time, the remaining players are still fighting a scaled up boss, and this is the factor that can immediately make playing with friends a bit tricky. Not only that, but everyone being on the same page helps a ton. If someone makes a decision that wasn't necessary and it costs them, you having to go heal them at a time that you can't predict might sway the entire outcome when the moment before was completely fine. This dynamic is one of my absolute favorite parts of Nightreign and isn't a thing that I've gotten to experience in previous games. With the mechanic of needing to use your damage to resurrect your downed allies, hitting them with range attacks can be quite effective, or even doubling up the damage when 2 are close at the same time with an ability like Guardians. Even getting one of your players to crawl into where an enemy is already being targeted and dealt damage may be the play to get them up even faster. The system of resurrections being harder each time there's a consecutive death can be leveraged more and more by how much raw skill and quick thinking the remaining players can utilize, but at the end of the day, there are points when going to save your teammates just doesn't pan out. Having the Wending Grace item when playing solo is much nicer because then you can still resurrect, but you don't have to deal with all of these intricacies of healing your players, so everything's on you, but there still is a way to actually get back up if you need to. Additionally, being able to set up your character solo at the beginning of a map can be much trickier and end rounds immediately if you aren't even more picky with what you go and what you do. What I mean by this is there's a lot of mistakes that you can make that are covered up by your team when you have 3 different people. Imagine one player's not as good as the other 2, or maybe 2 aren't as good as the main person. I think the pressure of solo will be what draws more hardcore players in, but I believe the multiplayer route is easier all in all. The Night Lord bosses I have personally played so far are made well enough where you can definitely master their movesets and avoid a lot of the danger. But I found that even after having defeated the final boss in the network test and doing it again on day 1, it was still hard. Gladius's ability to split into 3 separate enemies and the range attacks with the chain swords were really the nail in the coffin at times. It also has a fire breath attack that pops up very fast with more range than you would ever expect. The second Night Lord, Abel, Baron of the Night, the size of his character model was surprising, and the mobility reminded me of fighting Bale the first time, but with a lot less opportunity to hit him in the second phase. One amazing mechanic is the ability to stagger him out of the grab animation when he's eating other players on your team. This could easily save your team, but there's also the opportunity to get a special animation upon inflicting poison. It does recommend this type of damage on him, and the times that we used it were easily the smoothest attempts so far. The other Night Lords are still part of the game that I have yet to discover upon writing this video, but I'm looking forward to sharing more on my entire experience of the game and more discoveries I make along the way. I would love for you all to let me know what you want to hear me cover about this game, and if you're going to be playing it as well. What are your opinions and are you enjoying it so far? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.